welcome to Technology and Livelihood Education Baking for Beginners series, a bread and pastry production for the junior high school. Are you guys ready? Let's begin. Our today's topics are the following. Since you are a beginner, we will be tackling down first the history of baking, and then we will see the differences between cooking and baking. So let's start. Before we continue, I would like to share this quote. People who love to eat are always the best people, they say. Are we the best people because we love to eat? Are you the best person because you love to eat? Do you love cooking? Do you love baking either? Well, if yes, let's start the discussion. Let's discuss first the history of baking. Part of the history of baking, it is believed that during 4000 to 2100 BC, bread was being baked by the Egyptian. So it all started in Egypt. And during this time, it is believed that these skills, or they learned the skills from Babylonians. So after the Egyptians, in 600 BC, bread baking in ancient Greece led to the invention of the first enclosed ovens. That is why, up to now, we are still using different types of ovens in baking. And then after the Greece, or the ancient Greece, beginning around the year 300 BC, baking became an official pastime and even an occupation in the Roman society. So pastries during this time became synonymous with festivity and celebration. That is why in every celebration that we have, in every gatherings, in every festivity that we have, there is always what we call pastries. There is always what we call cakes. That is because it all started in what we call pastime and occupation in the Roman society. The art of baking spread to Europe between 500 to 1500 AD. So from Egypt to Greece, down to Europe, the baking spread. By the 13th century, London became a commercial center for baking, and even an industry of baking had sprung up. Medieval bakers often made gingerbread and fruitcake during this time. In 1600, a part of the history, during the early modern era, around the time of the 17th century, more refined sugars and mold were used for the first time. If you notice, we have different types of sugars. We have what we call the brown sugar, the refined sugar, white sugar, and others. Then, we also have different molders used in baking. We have what we call molders for cakes, molders for making cookies, molders for making cupcakes, and so many more. So cakes were consumed with a glass of sweet wine or tea in what we call modern era. And then in 1800s, new and refined leavening agents are developed with extra refined flour and baking powder falling into common use. So not only sugars were developed, but also what we call leaveners, or the leavening agents such as baking powder and baking soda. With the rise of cities and outdoor cafes, in 19th century they saw baking done on industrial scale. And in the 20th century, cakes and baking become a luxury pastime as well as luxury item. So cake decorating also becomes an art form, especially with the rise of cakes for birthdays, with the rise of cakes for weddings, or any other special celebrations. So those are what we call the short or the brief history of baking. So let's now move on with the differences between baking and cooking. Do you think baking and cooking are the same? Well, let's find out. So when we say baking, basically it is a method of cooking food by using dry heat, usually in an oven. So that is baking. And when we say cooking, it is a method of preparing food by using heat, involves manipulating the chemical properties of every ingredients. So basically, baking is considered as science. A science because we cannot create a successful baked product. We cannot create a successful baked goods without measuring each and every ingredients needed for that particular baked product. So we will measure every ingredients accurately. In baking, we measure every ingredients correctly. That is why it is considered as science. However, cooking is considered as an art. An art because we use every ingredients according to our preferences, according to our taste. So that is the difference between baking and cooking. Now, I want you to show the different, I want to show you the different baked goods that we can make if we have this particular skills in baking. So, these are the common goods or baked goods that we can make if we have or if we develop skills in baking. We can create breads, whether it is a quick bread, yeast bread, whatever. We can make cookies for families, for kids. We can make pies, we can create cakes, and whatsoever. So these are the common baked goods. So I hope you learned from the history of baking down to the differences between baking and cooking. And the next time we will be tackling down the different tools and equipment used for baking, the different ingredients we use for baking, and all other topics involved in baking as we continue our Baking for Beginners series, a junior high school bread and pastry production topic. So with that, I am Jinky L. Hassan from MLQ High School. Happy baking, everyone!